I am a man who is not known, generally speaking, not known. Whatever I did in my life, it always was what people didn't expect. It was generally predicted it won't work. It was difficult to start. Yeah. And what happened is that I discovered that I was an essayist, really. I was not a novelist. I was not a scientific writer. Yeah. I was really an essayist. The only problem was that in our age, in our time, there was no such thing as an essayist, because essays were dead for 200 years, 300 years. Yeah? They were dead. There was no life in them. They were not part of the literature going on, really important. Yeah? And there was no publisher who would seriously publish essays anymore. This was, in 200 years ago, 300 years ago, the natural way that the mind of writers worked and was rewarded, etc., commercially. So when I was 80, I know it's very late, but it didn't stop me. Nevertheless, when I was 80, I then founded a company which does nothing else but essays. And that is Notting Hill Editions, the company devoted to revival of the essay. Notting Hill, as a publishing company, if I am looking at it and saying, how did you come into being? Well, I do things in life without deciding why and how and what. I just do it, right? I come across a situation in the world which doesn't suit me. I deal with it one way. I ignore what there is, and I say, we got to change it. You create the frame. You create the material, the format. You create the format. If there is no format, you create it. Most people look at it commercially and say, nobody publishes that sort of things, they give up. I don't do that. The fact that nobody wants to publish things like that doesn't stop me. I believe that what happens is too important. And when you look at the books, you find, what do you find? First of all, they have got a format, which means that they stay. You don't throw them away. Secondly, they are brief. Why? Because it's the essayistic quality that what you want to say has to be said in few words, relatively speaking. It is really important. And so that is how this format developed, and all the books we're doing now have the same dimensions, precisely the same dimensions. They may be thicker and thinner, but they still have the same dimensions. And the quality of the whole unit with the linen element in it, so that it is not something that says, throw me away. It is something that says, don't throw me away. And so when gradually I found that when we did it like that, and we treated books which are not nowadays treated like this as a very important, valuable thing, then it lent itself to the format which we have adopted. And that is unique and at once recognizable as different from everything else in the market. People stop, I say, what's this? What's this? And they take it to hand and say, Jesus, that's good. And that is something I didn't expect when I started. But it turns out to be perhaps the most important, or at least one of the most important qualities of what this company is doing. It's creating permanent bits of literature which relates to the past, but it's not the past. It has got the format of today. My background with the cube stems from the fact that I am a game inventor, and I have invented many, many games, which some of them were very successful, some of them not so successful. I first came across the cube at one of the toy fairs in Nuremberg, which is every year. When I first saw the cube, immediately made an impression on me. And really, we as a company acquired some of the rights after spending a lot of time with the cube and showing it to every company, which mattered, and not being successful. I ended up with Ideal, which actually had somebody there who understood and were interested enough, but the trouble was that they were going bust. However, the cube saved them, and it became the success. When the success ended, the inventor and the Hungarian government were also offered to share with us the further development of the cube, and they were not interested. That is why at the end of the day, we ended up with all the rights. And we continued working on the cube and bringing it back second time, which is not as big as the first time. Second time, still very, very significant, and has a great influence in our company. The success of the cube, twice in fact, enabled the creation of the essay, or the company which is now publishing the essay, certainly derives from the success of the cube. The quality of continuing doing the opposite of what the world believes are true both for the cube and for the essays. And there is a connection between the two. And the connection between the two is our company. Because we do things like this because we believe and we take no account of what the world thinks. It's difficult not to see in the whole history of myself the influence of the angel which happens to sit on my left shoulder. She is the angel of luck. Without that, I wouldn't be able to do anything, because that enabled me to escape from the camp, to survive the camp, to survive Israel, to come to this country and to find a life here which I could live, which I couldn't live anywhere else, etc., etc., etc. Generally speaking, the German SS was in charge of killing all the Jews really everywhere, right? So they came to our town. But what happened in our town is that one man called Kästner, who was a journalist, undertook to contact the SS and start negotiations with them. If you can imagine, that's an amazing thing, when the Jews were all being taken to Auschwitz and killed, they managed to have a beginning of a relationship with the Germans. How? Because the man offered, of course he didn't have the right to do that, but he offered light bulbs. You see, the Germans missed or didn't have everything what they should have had in the war. One of the things they didn't have is light bulbs. So he made a deal, which actually he had no business to make, and he couldn't possibly fulfill it anyway. But he persuaded the Germans that the British would be prepared to give them light bulbs if they released some Jews. And that's really the kernel of the story. It's very difficult for me to pass judgment on how important it is what we have done now by having this publishing house devoted to the essay, because I'm naturally a boastful person. And I believe it is amazing what we have done and what we are doing. And I think the important thing for me is that if we created something which is likely to become accepted by the communities of literary communities as something which is now coming back, essayistic writing, essayistic quality, and so on and so forth, I'm very impressed by me. I'm very impressed by that we got that far. So if it is successful, I'm very proud, of course, of that, and I would be lying to you if I said it didn't matter. It does matter.